The gate wouldn't open. Rain hammered the pavement so hard it bounced back into my eyes, and the red emergency gate at the end of Juniper Ridge just sat there, locked, silent, smug. Headlights stacked up behind me. Horns blared. Someone screamed my name over the storm. The hillside groaned. Not thunder. Not wind. The ground itself made a low tearing sound, like fabric ripping under too much weight. Mud spilled over the curb in thick moving sheets, swallowing the painted lines and racing straight toward the trapped cars. "Open it," a man shouted, slamming both hands against the steel bars. A minivan slid sideways, tires useless, snapping a mailbox clean off at the base. Then I saw her. Blair Wexley, barefoot-soaked mascara streaked down her face, forcing her way through the crowd. Her voice cut through the chaos, sharp with panic. "Grant, you warned us about this, so do something." Behind her, the slope shuddered again. Rocks popped free. Fences folded. The mud surged faster, heavier, louder. I wrapped my hands around the freezing metal of the gate and pulled with everything I had. Nothing. Not even a rattle. I looked back at Blair as people began to run, and a single thought hit me harder than the rain. This didn't start tonight, and that gate didn't lock itself. Blair Wexley ordered the gate installed before the ash from the wildfire had even cooled. I watched her do it from across the street as she pointed at the old emergency exit with a manicured finger and told the contractor loud enough for half the block to hear. "That road makes the whole ridge look like a back alley. We're closing it." I crossed the street before the first hole was even drilled. "You can't block that," I shouted over the generator. "That's an emergency evacuation route." Blair turned slowly, rain jacket, spotless hair, perfect, like she'd stepped out of a brochure instead of a burn zone. She smiled, then said the line that explained everything. "I'm the HOA president," she replied, crisp and bright. "And yes, we can." She didn't ask. She didn't debate. She directed. 2 days later, steel posts were sunk into concrete, the red emergency exit sign quietly removed, replaced by a brushed metal placard that read, "Private Scenic Access, Residents Only." When I confronted her again at the curb, she acted like I was being dramatic on purpose. "Grant," she said, drawing my name out, "this community is trying to heal after the fire. We don't need ugly panic infrastructure reminding people of disasters." I told her it wasn't decoration. It was a mandated route tied to county approvals. She tilted her head, listening the way people do when they've already decided you're wrong. "Engineering is about numbers," she replied. "Leadership is about vision." That was Blair, young, polished, and absolutely convinced that confidence could substitute for physics. She'd been HOA president less than a year, parachuted in from a marketing firm that sold lifestyle communities to out-of-state buyers. One sentence was all it took to understand her, she believed. Fear lowered property values more than fire ever could. At the next HOA meeting, she made an example of me. I laid out slope risk maps and evacuation codes, keeping it tight post-burn hills, plus monsoon rain equals fast debris flow, and blocking the exit turns a bad night into a body count. I asked for one thing: remove the gate. Blair didn't even look at my papers. She leaned back and said, "We can't let one homeowner derail the neighborhood with worst-case fantasies." Then she reframed it like she always did. She warned the room my comments could trigger insurance concerns. She reminded everyone that buyers were watching. And she suggested once very carefully that continuing to spread alarmist material might violate HOA conduct rules. By the time the meeting ended, the gate stayed. I left with a written notice for disruptive behavior and a reminder that fines could escalate fast enough to threaten a lien. As I stepped outside, Blair called after me, sweet as sugar. "Relax, Grant," she said. "If anything ever happens, we'll handle it." And in that moment, I realized she truly believed she could. The first fine arrived 3 days after the gate went up. It wasn't dramatic. No threat. No explanation worth arguing with. Just a thin envelope taped to my door that morning, the HOA logo embossed like a smug stamp of approval. Unauthorized presence near restricted association property. $200. Due in 10 days. Restricted property. That was their term for the emergency exit. I stood there longer than I should have, rainwater dripping off the edge of the envelope onto my shoes, rereading the line until it stopped sounding like English. That road had been there longer than the HOA itself. Fire engines had used it. Evacuation drills had routed through it. Kids used to ride bikes down it before the fire scarred the hill raw. Now it was restricted. I didn't pay the fine. Instead, I walked the ridge. I kept my phone in my pocket and my hands visible, like I was already expecting to be accused of something. The ground told the story Blair didn't want anyone to hear. The soil was powdery on top, slick underneath, a dangerous combination after a burn. Hairline cracks traced lazy curves across the slope, where the earth had begun to pull apart millimeter by millimeter. You wouldn't notice them unless you were looking for them. I was looking for them. I photographed everything: wide shots, close-ups, my boot toe for scale. I marked distances, angles, drainage paths. I didn't dramatize. I didn't speculate. I just documented. Facts have a way of surviving long after opinions burn out. By the time I got back home, my phone buzzed. HOA notice: unauthorized documentation of association property may result in escalating penalties. They were watching me now. The next day, the warning signs disappeared. Not the gate, the signs. The temporary placards I'd zip-tied along the sidewalk the night before. Evac route blocked, safety concern. Plain black letters, no accusations, just information. Every single one was gone by noon. I found them stacked neatly beside my trash cans, zip ties cut clean through. That afternoon, a white SUV rolled slowly past my house twice. No markings, tinted windows. It stopped the third time. A man in a polo shirt stepped out, clipboard tucked under his arm like a shield. HOA, compliance, he said, not offering a name. We've had complaints. About what? Your behavior, he replied, glancing past me toward the hill. You're creating unnecessary alarm. I told him the alarm was the point. He made a note on his clipboard and reminded me casually that fines could escalate, parking privileges could be revoked, and continued violations might result in temporary access restrictions to shared roads. Shared, I repeated. He didn't smile. That night, my neighbor Frank knocked on my door. He'd lived here longer than anyone on our block. Retired firefighter. Big hands. Careful eyes. He didn't come inside, just stood on the porch like he didn't want to be seen agreeing with me. You stirring things up? He asked. I'm trying to keep the exit open. He nodded once. They sent a letter around. Said you're exaggerating. Said you're hurting property values. And Frank exhaled slowly. They asked if anyone wanted to sign something. A statement. About you. My stomach tightened. Did you? No, he said immediately. But some will. That was how it started, not with force, but with pressure. Quiet. Social. A suggestion that I was the problem. Not the gate, not the hill, not the rain clouds already stacking on the horizon. Over the next week, the neighborhood shifted. Conversation stopped when I approached. A woman I'd helped re-level her fence after the fire suddenly crossed the street when she saw me. Someone posted anonymously on the HOA forum that certain residents should stop pretending to be experts. Another fine arrived. Then another. Each one small enough to be annoying, not outrageous. Designed to train compliance, not provoke a fight. Blair never contacted me directly. She didn't have to. Instead, she let the system do what it did best: nudge, isolate inconvenience. The gate stayed locked. The road stayed blocked. And the hill kept changing quietly, patiently, doing exactly what burned hills do when water starts to soak in. One evening, as I was measuring a new crack near the base of the slope, a security truck pulled up behind me. Lights on, engine idling. Sir, the driver called out not unkindly, you need to step away from the fence. This isn't a fence, I said. It's a choke point. He shrugged. I don't make the rules. I know, I replied. That's the problem. As I walked back toward my house, rain began to fall, not hard, just enough to darken the dirt and make the cracks stand out a little more. Behind me, the locked gate gleamed wet and red in the dusk, and I knew this was no longer about convincing anyone. It was about how far Blair and the HOA were willing to go to pretend nothing was wrong, and how much pressure they'd apply to make me stop proving otherwise. The system didn't move all at once. It crept. The next HOA meeting notice hit inboxes on a Tuesday morning, flagged mandatory attendance encouraged. The agenda looked harmless: budget adjustments, landscaping updates, community conduct reminders, but I knew better. When an HOA adds the word conduct, someone's about to be labeled a problem. I walked into the clubhouse 10 minutes early and felt it immediately. The room was arranged differently, chairs angled toward the board like a courtroom. A printed packet sat on every seat except mine. Blair Wexley was already there, centered, composed, tapping at her tablet. When she looked up and saw me, her expression didn't change, but the meeting began on time for once. That was my first warning. She opened with pleasantries. Fire recovery progress. Gratitude for resilience. Applause cued and delivered. Then she slid into it. We've had reports, Blair said smoothly, of repeated interference with association infrastructure, unauthorized signage, unapproved inspections, communications that have caused unnecessary fear. Her eyes found me, held for half a second, then moved on like I wasn't worth the focus. We cannot allow individual residents to undermine safety by spreading misinformation. I raised my hand. She didn't call on me. Instead, a board member I barely knew, a man who'd never spoken up before, cleared his throat and read from the packet. A proposed amendment. Temporary, he said, designed to maintain order during recovery. It gave the HOA authority to restrict access to sensitive zones, including the ridge and all associated access roads pending review. That meant the exit. They were retroactively legalizing the blockade. When Blair finally acknowledged me, it was with a practiced sigh. Grant, you've had opportunities to share concerns. We reviewed them. Reviewed by who I asked. Our consultants. Name them. A pause. Not long, but long enough. Landscaping professionals, she said. Risk-adjacent specialists. That wasn't an answer. I stood. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't gesture. This exit is required by county code. Blocking it without approval puts every downhill home at risk. A murmur rippled through the room. Blair lifted one hand, the universal signal for calm. This is exactly the behavior we're addressing, she said. Alarmism framed as expertise. Then she delivered the real blow. Effective immediately, the association is issuing a cease and desist regarding unauthorized risk communications. Continued violations may result in fines, access suspension, or legal action. Access suspension. They weren't just trying to silence me anymore. They were trying to trap me inside the rules. By the end of the meeting, the amendment passed. Not unanimously, but enough. People avoided my eyes as they filed out. Fear does that. Makes decent people quiet. Outside, rain had started again. Not heavy, just persistent. The next morning, my parking tag didn't scan. I sat there at the community gate, inching forward as cars piled up behind me, scanning again and again, until the guard leaned out of his booth. Your access is temporarily restricted, he said, apologetic but firm. HOA order. For what? He checked his screen. Pending compliance review. I parked on the street and walked home in the rain, shoes, soaked, anger tight in my chest. When I reached my driveway, another envelope waited. This one was thicker. Formal letter, HOA letterhead. Blair's signature at the bottom. It cited violations, listed dates, photos of me near the gate, me measuring cracks, me talking to neighbors, all framed as harassment, disruption, trespass. The fines totaled just under 5 figures, enough to hurt, enough to scare, enough to force compliance or foreclosure eventually. That was when I realized the HOA wasn't acting defensively. They were advancing. I called the county fire marshal that afternoon, left a detailed voicemail, followed up with an email, attached photos of the blocked exit, the welded gate, the amended HOA rule. No response. 2 days later, a notice appeared on the gate. Area closed, a HOA authorization required. Below it, smaller print, for safety. The irony burned. That evening, Frank knocked again. This time he came inside. They're going door to door, he said quietly, asking people to sign statements, saying you're exaggerating risks, that you're unstable. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. Who signed enough? He replied. But not everyone. He leaned forward. They asked me if I'd testify against you if it came to it, and I told them I fought fires long enough to know when something's wrong, and this hill's wrong. That was the first crack in their wall. The next came from an unexpected place. An email from a junior board member, anonymous, sent from a burner account. One line of text, one attachment. They're changing the maps. The attachment was a screenshot, an internal HOA planning document showing the emergency exit reclassified as optional scenic access. No county stamp, no approval number, just a quiet rewrite. I sat there, staring at the screen, while rain tapped steadily against the windows. The system had entered the fight fully. Now rules, fines, paperwork, reputation. They weren't just blocking an exit, they were erasing it. And if they succeeded when the rain finally came hard, there would be no route out and no paper trail pointing to who locked the gate. Not unless I forced one into existence. I didn't sleep that night. The screenshot burned into my head. The emergency exit quietly reclassified the language, softened until danger sounded optional. Scenic access. Like the hill was a postcard instead of a loaded slope waiting for rain. By dawn, I was at my desk cross-checking everything. Old plats, county approvals from when Juniper Ridge was first carved into the mesa, fire evacuation diagrams filed after the last major burn. The exit wasn't optional. It never had been. It was the only downhill release valve for 3 streets of homes, mine included. Someone had rewritten history. I traced the metadata on the file, creation date 2 weeks earlier, author a consultant name I didn't recognize. I dug deeper. Business registry. Shell LLC registered out of state. Same address as a development firm I'd seen before, on glossy brochures, mailed to select homeowners, advertising future enhancements to the overlook. That was the motive. The exit cut straight through the parcel they wanted to package. An open road meant restrictions, liability, disclosure. A locked gate turned the land into a clean slate. They weren't just hiding risk, they were monetizing it. I printed everything and drove to the ridge, despite the restriction notice. If they wanted to accuse me of trespass, they could do it with fresh evidence in my hands. The rain had intensified overnight, soaking the ash-dark soil until it smelled metallic and wrong. Water sheeted across the slope instead of sinking in, carving shallow channels that hadn't been there a week earlier. Near the base of the hill, I saw a new fissure, 10 feet long, clean-edged, wide enough to slide my fingers into. I knelt, ignoring the sting of cold water, soaking my jeans, and felt the soil crumble under light pressure. This wasn't surface settling, this was tension releasing, the kind that precedes movement. My chest tightened. I took photos, measured depth, marked coordinates. As I stood, a truck door slammed behind me. Grant, a voice called, "You're not supposed to be here." It was Blair. She stood by her SUV umbrella, perfectly centered, like the rain had agreed to avoid her. She didn't sound angry. She sounded irritated. "You reclassified the exit," I said, holding up my phone. She glanced at it, then back at me. "That document isn't public. It's also fraudulent." Her smile thinned. "Words matter. So do bodies," I snapped. "This hill's failing." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You don't understand the scale of what you're interfering with." That was the second admission. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You blocked an evacuation route for a view deck. For a project," she corrected. "One that brings in real money, jobs, stability, at the cost of lives." She didn't deny it. She didn't need to. "People exaggerate risk all the time," she said. "Nothing's happened. Yet," her eyes hardened, "you're going to stop." Or what? She leaned in just enough for me to smell her perfume under the rain. "Or the fines will escalate. The lien will proceed. And when the county looks, they'll see one homeowner crying wolf." I watched her drive away, tires spraying muddy water across the cracked asphalt, and felt something settle in me, not fear, resolve. That afternoon, the rain turned steady. Not dramatic, no thunder, just relentless pressure. I called the county again, left another voicemail, sent another email, attached photos of the fissure, the altered map, the consultant shell. Still nothing. At home, my wife watched me pace. She didn't ask questions. She'd seen this look before, when I knew something was wrong and the clock was running. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad enough. We might need to leave if it spikes," I said. Her jaw tightened. "Tonight, I don't know." That uncertainty, that was the emotional hit. Not panic, not anger. The cold calculation of how fast I could get my family out if the road failed. If the gate stayed shut. I walked the house, checking go bags we hadn't unpacked since the fire. Flashlights, documents, shoes by the door. Our kid asked why we were doing drills again. "Just being ready," I said, forcing calm. Outside, water pooled along the curb, flowing toward the locked exit that could have carried it away. By evening, my inbox lit up. An email from an insurance adjuster in the neighborhood. Subject line, question about evacuation access. Another from a contractor I barely knew. "They told us not to talk to you." Then one more from the same burner address as before. "They're rushing the vote. Emergency authority. Tomorrow." Attached was a calendar invite. HOA emergency meeting. Weather advisory noted. No agenda. They were accelerating. I stood at the window, watching rain blur the ridge into a dark smear against the sky. The fissure I'd measured was already wider in my mind, deeper, filling with water that had nowhere safe to go. They thought they could outrun the storm. They were wrong. And if the system wouldn't stop them, the hill would. The first response came from someone who wasn't supposed to respond at all. It wasn't the county. It wasn't code enforcement. It was a single-line email from the fire marshal's office sent just after noon. Received. Reviewing. No signature. No promise. Just acknowledgement. But after weeks of silence, it felt like a door cracking open. I didn't wait. I drove straight to the substation with a printed packet under my arm. Photos of the welded gate, timestamps of fines, the altered evacuation map, the fissure measurements taken less than 24 hours earlier. Rain followed me the whole way thin and needling, turning the parking lot into a gray mirror. The marshal on duty didn't invite me to sit. He skimmed the first page, then the second, then stopped at the map. "Who approved this change?" he asked. "The HOA," I said. No county stamp, no variance. He frowned. That exit's on our wildfire egress list. Was I corrected? They reclassified it. He picked up the phone without another word. While he called, I sent the same packet to County Emergency Management, copying a general inbox I'd found buried 3 layers deep on the county site. I added one sentence to the body. If rain intensity increases, this neighborhood has no compliant evacuation route. By the time I got home, a county vehicle was parked near the ridge. 2 officials stood by the locked gate, rain beating on their jackets, staring at the welded posts like they couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. One tugged on the latch. It didn't move. Blair arrived 10 minutes later. She came fast, umbrella, forgotten voice, already calibrated for control. "This is private association property," she said before anyone could speak. "You need authorization." The county rep didn't look at her. He photographed the gate. "Who authorized the closure?" he asked. "I did," Blair said, "as HOA president, and the fire marshal. We consulted professionals." "Names?" She hesitated. "Just a beat. Long enough." "Landscaping consultants," she said. The marshal stepped forward. "This route is listed as mandatory egress under post-burn protocol." Blair's smile returned brittle. "We dispute that classification." "Disputes don't override code," he replied. The rain thickened, drumming harder on metal and asphalt. Water began to pool near the base of the gate, pushing against the curb like it wanted through. "We'll need documentation," the county rep said. "Permits, variances, engineering sign-off." Blair nodded, already pulling out her phone. "Of course. We'll provide everything." She shot me a look-sharp warning. That afternoon, the HOA emergency meeting went ahead anyway. They held it indoors, away from the ridge, as if distance could reduce risk. Blair opened with urgency, reframing the county visit as a misunderstanding. She spoke about cooperation, patience, and not overreacting to weather events. Then she unveiled the board's move. Temporary emergency authority, power to reroute access, suspend descent, and control communications for safety. The irony was thick enough to choke on. I raised my hand. She couldn't ignore me now, not with the county watching. I stood and placed a single page on the table, the original evacuation map stamped and dated. "This is still active," I said. "You changed it without approval." Blair laughed softly. "Maps get updated all the time." The fire marshal stood. "Not without our office." Silence hit the room. The board members shifted. Papers rustled. Someone cleared their throat too loudly. A junior official from emergency management stepped forward. "We've reviewed preliminary materials," she said. "There are discrepancies." "Discrepancies?" Blair echoed. "Conflicting filings," the official continued. "Your association's documents do not align with county records." Blair's composure slipped just slightly. "We're in the middle of recovery. Paperwork lags." "Safety doesn't," the marshal replied. Outside thunder rolled, not overhead but far off, deep and heavy. The kind that comes with sustained rain, not spectacle. The county issued a verbal notice right there. "Do not alter evacuation infrastructure, pending review." Blair nodded tightly, lips pressed together. The next morning, the HOA tried anyway. At dawn, I woke to the sound of engines. Not cars, equipment. I grabbed my jacket and ran toward the ridge. 2 workers were unloading decorative bollards near the blocked exit, bright metal, meant to beautify the entrance. I called the marshal. He answered. Within 30 minutes, county vehicles returned, this time with paperwork. A temporary stop work order was slapped onto the gate, bright orange against red steel. The workers backed away. Blair arrived late, furious. "This is harassment," she snapped. "You're overstepping." The county rep didn't raise his voice. "Remove the obstruction. We'll appeal. Remove it now." She didn't. Instead, the HOA's attorney sent a letter that afternoon, formal, dense, threatening litigation if I continued defamatory actions. They CC'd the county confident paperwork would scare everyone back into line. It didn't, because the rain wouldn't stop. By evening runoff carved visible channels down the slope. Small stones clicked and shifted underfoot. A crack near the base widened another half-inch. I measured it, documented it, sent it. Emergency management issued an advisory, not an evacuation, but a warning. Potential slope instability. Residents advised to prepare. That was the phrase. Prepare. Blair tried to spin it. She emailed the neighborhood, calling it an abundance of caution. Reassured everyone that the association is in control. No one believed her anymore. Cars began disappearing from driveways. Porch lights stayed on. People packed quietly. The county scheduled a site inspection for the next morning. And as night fell, the rain intensified again, steady, unrelenting, soaking the mesa until the ground beneath Juniper Ridge felt saturated and tense like a held breath. I stood by the locked gate one last time, watching water push against the curb, backing up where the exit should have been. The system had finally looked up from its paperwork. But the hill didn't care about notices or appeals. It was loading weight, and something was about to give. The rain didn't let up overnight. It pressed down with the kind of patience that wears stone, smooth, no drama, no pause, just weight after weight sinking into the hill. By dawn, the neighborhood felt different. Not louder, quieter. Doors opened without greetings. Cars idled longer than usual. People avoided the ridge, but they couldn't stop looking at it like you watch a bad bruise to see if it's spreading. My phone buzzed before I finished my first cup of coffee. Unknown. They're shredding files. The burner again. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I knew exactly which files. I pulled up the HOA portal. Overnight posts had vanished, threads where residents had asked about the exit screenshots of the altered map, even the county advisory link. Gone. Replaced with a single pinned announcement from Blair. Please refrain from sharing unverified information. Official updates will be provided by the association. I felt something click into place. This wasn't damage control anymore. This was containment. I opened the folder on my desktop, the one I'd been building quietly for weeks, and started exporting. Photos, emails, notices, fine statements, the original stamped evacuation map, the reclassified version, metadata showing when and by whom it was altered, video clips of water backing up at the gate, time-stamped measurements of the fissures widening. I didn't editorialize. I didn't rant. I labeled it cleanly, Juniper Ridge Evacuation Route Suppression Evidence Pack. Then I sent it, every homeowner email I had. The county, fire marshal, emergency management, 2 local reporters who'd covered the wildfire recovery. I hit send once, then shut the laptop like it might explode. 10 minutes later, the replies started. Is this real? They told us you were exaggerating. My kid's school route goes past that exit. We tried to ask, she shut us down. The silence that Blair relied on cracked all at once. By mid-morning, cars lined the street near the clubhouse. Not for a meeting, people arguing in clusters, phones out, pointing uphill. The rain intensified again, heavier now, soaking everything until the soil darkened to a color I didn't like. A truck pulled into my driveway. A man stepped out, mud on his boots, company logo half scraped off the door. He didn't give his name. They told us to install the bollards yesterday, he said. Said permits were cleared. Were they? He shook his head. Not even close. We flagged it. They told us to shut up. He handed me a USB drive. Invoices, emails, voice notes. Then he left. That was the whistleblower. I copied the contents immediately and forwarded them to the same list, adding one line this time. Contractor confirms orders came directly from HOA president. The emergency meeting notice hit inboxes an hour later. Mandatory weather response session. Scheduled for that evening. Same community center. Same board. Same Blair. But this time, the county was coming. By afternoon, emergency management issued a stronger advisory. Residents downhill of Burn Scar should prepare for immediate evacuation if conditions worsen. The word immediate rippled through the neighborhood like a shockwave. I walked the ridge one last time. The fissure I'd measured had doubled. Water bubbled up from below, not running off anymore, pressurized, searching for release. Trees leaned at angles that made my stomach drop. The gate sat there, defiant and useless, water pooling against it like a held breath. At 4:30, thunder rolled closer. Not sharp, heavy. My wife met me at the door. They're asking if we're leaving, she said quietly. Not yet, I replied. But be ready. We packed without panic. Shoes, documents, flashlights, radios. The same drills we'd practiced now, stripped of theory. At 6, the emergency meeting began. The parking lot overflowed. County trucks, fire vehicles, media vans. Blair arrived late, flanked by 2 board members and the HOA attorney. Her posture was perfect. Her face was not. Inside the room buzzed with anger and fear. People shouted questions before the meeting was even called to order. Blair raised her hands. Please, we are handling this. A county official stood. No, you are not. The room went still. The fire marshal stepped forward next, holding my evidence pack printed thick enough to thud when he set it on the table. This route was required. It was blocked. Warnings were issued. Blair opened her mouth. Outside, a deep grinding sound rolled through the building. Not thunder. The floor vibrated, lights flickered. Someone screamed. Water surged under the doors at the back of the hall, thin at first, then faster. The marshal looked at his radio. All units, this is not a drill. Blair's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and desperate now. Grant, what do we do? I didn't answer. Because outside the hill finally exhaled, and gravity was done waiting. The building shuddered again. Not violently yet, but enough to make the hanging lights sway and the murmurs die mid-sentence. A low, wet, grinding sound crept up through the concrete floor, the kind you felt in your teeth before you understood it with your brain. Someone near the back yelled, "The parking lot's flooding." I moved to the window. Water was no longer running along the pavement. It was sliding thick and brown, carrying gravel and ash in slow, heavy sheets. The storm drains were overwhelmed, coughing water back up instead of swallowing it. This was the failure mode I'd warned them about. I turned back toward the room. People were standing now, panic breaking through whatever trust they'd still had in Blair's voice. Phones were out recording, calling, shaking. The fire marshal was already on his radio barking coordinates. The county official had his eyes on the ceiling jaw, tight, listening to the building the way firefighters listen to a roof before it goes. Blair looked small for the first time. Her shoulders were rigid, hands clenched on the edge of the table, like it might anchor her. The attorney beside her whispered urgently, but she wasn't listening anymore. Her gaze locked onto mine again, wide searching. This time, there was no authority in it, only fear. Outside, a sharp crack echoed wood, snapping, or maybe a retaining edge giving way somewhere uphill. Screams erupted from the parking lot as people ran back inside, soaked, shouting over one another. The road's gone. There's mud coming down the access slope. My car's stuck. The marshal raised his voice. Everyone listen. We are evacuating now. Downhill residents first. Follow instructions. Do not go toward the ridge. Blair took one step toward me, voice breaking through the noise. Grant, please. You know this hill. Tell them where to go. I looked past her through the window to where the emergency exit should have been doing its job. Locked. Blocked. Useless. The ground gave another deep resonant groan, longer this time, angrier, and somewhere outside a wall of earth finally let go. The sound wasn't loud at first. It was massive, and it was moving toward us. The evacuation didn't unfold the way Blair had rehearsed it in her head. It never does. The moment the fire marshal took command, the HOA ceased to matter. No votes, no procedures, no polished reassurances. Authority shifted in real time, snapping away from the board table and into radios, boots, and shouted instructions that didn't care who used to be in charge. Blair tried to speak again. No one listened. A deputy physically stepped in front of her as people surged toward the exits that still worked. Phones rang unanswered. Children cried. Someone knocked over a chair and didn't stop to pick it up. Outside, the sound grew worse. Not louder, closer. The building vibrated in uneven pulses now, like something massive was testing the ground beneath it, pressing forward, retreating, then pushing harder. Mud slapped against the back wall with wet, hollow thuds. I caught the fire marshal's eye and pointed downhill. That route's compromised, I said. They can't send people that way. He nodded once. We're rerouting. To where he hesitated. There it was. The gap. The missing answer. The route that should have existed but didn't. Because the emergency exit was still blocked. I moved fast, weaving through the crowd, grabbing shoulders, redirecting people away from the ridge-facing doors. A woman clutched my arm nails, digging through fabric. They said it was safe, she sobbed. They said you were lying. I know, I said. Just follow me. Outside chaos reigned. Cars were jammed at bad angles, some already half buried in mud where the parking lot sloped wrong. Water and debris surged through the low points, carrying branches, trash cans, pieces of fencing that clanged and spun like toys. Sirens wailed, but even they sounded uncertain now. The deputy barked orders into his radio. We need heavy equipment now. The access road is failing. Static crackled back. Delays. Road closures. Too much water. The system was reacting, but it was late. Blair stood near the building entrance, frozen rain plastering her hair to her face. She looked around like someone waiting for permission that would never come. I passed her without stopping. She grabbed my sleeve. Grant, wait. I turned. Her voice dropped, stripped of performance. If this gets out of control, they'll blame me. I stared at her rain, stinging my eyes. This is out of control, she swallowed. You know what I mean. Behind her, a deep crack echoed from the hillside, sharp final. People screamed again, as a fresh surge of mud spilled across the road, faster, now thicker, carrying stones the size of backpacks. A fire engine tried to reposition, and stalled wheels spinning uselessly. Blair's grip tightened. Tell them something. Anything. You're the expert. I leaned in close enough for her to hear me over the storm. You took the exit, I said. You erased the warning. This is what's left. Her hand fell away. The deputy shouted for everyone to move toward higher ground near the school complex, one of the few areas not directly downhill. Volunteers formed lines, guiding families through knee-deep water. Someone slipped, 2 others hauled them back up. The fire marshal keyed his radio again, voice tight. Slope movement confirmed. Repeat movement confirmed. That was the phrase. Not possible. Not likely. Confirmed. I felt the ground shift beneath my boots, not dramatically, but unmistakably. A slow, sickening glide like standing on a heavy conveyor belt you couldn't see. The hill had crossed its threshold. There were no more warnings to give. Over the radio, a voice broke in urgent clipped. Upper section just failed. We've got a debris flow moving fast. I looked uphill. Through the rain and darkness, shapes were moving that shouldn't move. Trees leaned, then tilted farther. A line of earth cracked open, black against brown, widening as water forced its way through. This wasn't a slide yet. It was the breath before the scream. I pulled out my phone not to record, but to call my wife. 1 ring, 2. We're evacuating, I said. Get to the school. Now. I hear it, she replied. We're moving. I turned back toward the ridge one last time. The emergency gate stood in silhouette against the floodlights, still locked, still blocking the route that would have bled pressure away from everything downhill. A county official ran up breathless. We can't hold this area. If that slope lets go, it will, I said. He looked at me sharply. How soon? I didn't guess. Minutes, I replied. Behind us, the hill made a sound I had never heard before, not cracking, not grinding, but a deep, continuous roar like the earth itself tearing loose. People began to run. Not in panic yet, but with the instinctive urgency that comes when something ancient and unstoppable finally decides to move. I backed away slowly, eyes fixed uphill, heart pounding every warning I'd ever given, collapsing into this single, unavoidable moment. Because the mud wasn't threatening anymore. It was coming. The hill broke loose with a sound that didn't belong to weather. It was deeper than thunder, heavier than wind, an endless tearing roar that swallowed every other noise as the slope finally gave in. The ground lurched beneath us not sharply, but with a sickening glide like the earth itself had decided to stand up and move. Move, move now, the fire marshal shouted. People ran, not in clean lines, not calmly. Families clutched each other, slipping in ankle-deep water as mud surged across the pavement in thick, unstoppable waves. A parked sedan lifted sideways tires, losing contact, and slammed into a light pole, hard enough to snap it at the base. The lights went out. For half a second, everything vanished into rain and darkness. Then emergency strobes cut through the night, red and blue, reflecting off brown water and panicked faces. I grabbed the arm of a man frozen in place, staring uphill. Don't look at it, I yelled. Run. Behind us, the first real wall of debris crashed down the access slope. Not a splash, a collision. Trees snapped like matchsticks. Fencing folded and vanished. The sound was so loud it pressed against my chest, knocking the air out of me as the wave slammed into the lower lot. Cars were already trapped. A minivan spun, slowly carried sideways by the flow, bumping helplessly into another vehicle before settling at a crooked angle. Someone inside screamed. I waded toward it, water tugging at my legs, boots sinking into slick mud that tried to pull me down with every step. A deputy reached it first, smashing the window with his baton. Out now, he shouted. The sliding door stuck. Mud jammed the track. The hill roared again. I braced myself against the van and pulled with everything I had. The door tore free in a grinding shriek, and 2 kids spilled out into the rain sobbing. Their mother followed shaking, clutching them so hard it looked like she might never let go. Go, I pointed toward higher ground. Don't stop, they ran. The fire marshal was everywhere at once, barking orders into his radio, redirecting responders away from collapsing paths. Upper section failed, repeat failed. Keep units off the ridge, establish safe corridor by the school, the only place left. Another surge hit faster this time. Mud slapped against my thighs, nearly knocking me over. A trash dumpster floated past like it weighed nothing, slamming into a fence and ripping it loose. And still, the gate. I saw it through the chaos red steel, half buried now, water piling up behind it in a violent, useless swell. The blocked emergency exit was doing exactly what I'd warned it would do, backing pressure into the neighborhood instead of releasing it. Blair appeared out of the darkness, hair plastered to her face, blazer gone, eyes wild. She stumbled toward me, slipping, catching herself on a parked truck. "Grant!" she screamed. The road open, the road I stared at her, rain streaming down my face, mud churning around us. "I can't," I shouted back. "It's locked. You welded it shut." Another crash thundered from uphill louder than the rest. People screamed as a fresh surge burst through a side path, carrying chunks of concrete and shattered planters, the remains of her beautification project, and hurled them across the lot. A county official grabbed Blair's arm. "You need to move now." She shook him off, eyes locked on me. "You know how to stop this." The fire marshal stepped between us, voice iron. "Ma'am, this is no longer a discussion." She finally broke. Her shoulders collapsed as the reality she'd smothered with paperwork and confidence crashed down around her. I didn't think she sobbed. I thought we had time. The marshal didn't answer her. He turned to me instead. "Which structures are next?" I looked uphill, tracking the flow lines I'd mapped a dozen times, now alive and deadly. "The eastern row," I said. "If that section goes, it'll take the lower home straight through." As if summoned, the ground there shuddered. A deep crack split the slope, visible even through the rain. Trees tilted roots, tearing free in slow motion, before vanishing into the churning brown mass below. A house at the edge lurched, foundation groaning, then dropped out of sight with a sound like the world snapping in half. The crowd went silent. Phones were up everywhere now, recording not for social media, but for proof that this was real, that no one was exaggerating, that the Hill didn't care about HOA rules or reassurances. Deputies forced people back, forming a human line to keep them from running toward the destruction. Sirens wailed continuously, overlapping, dissonant, powerless, against the roar of the earth. The marshal's radio crackled. "County command to all units, this is a mass casualty potential. Secure perimeter, prepare for extended response." Mass casualty. Blair heard it. I saw it hit her like a physical blow. She sank to her knees in the mud, hands shaking, staring at the hillside she'd insisted was safe. No one helped her up, because right then, another surge tore through the lot, closer, stronger, and the marshal grabbed my shoulder, shouting into my ear. "This isn't over," he said. "We're still inside it." And uphill, the hill answered him with another long, furious roar, signaling that the worst of it hadn't arrived yet. The rain didn't pause for testimony. It kept coming down in sheets as deputies shoved people farther back, radios barking over one another, while the mud continued to surge in uneven pulses. The community center behind us had become a command post by accident. Doors flung open, tables dragged aside, emergency lights humming as officials tried to impose order on a disaster already in motion. Inside, the air smelled like wet clothes, fear, and ozone. "Everyone against the walls," a deputy shouted. "Clear the center." The fire marshal climbed onto a chair, mud streaked up his pant legs, voice cutting clean through the chaos. "Listen to me. This slope failure is ongoing. We are establishing accountability now." He turned, held up a thick folder wrapped in plastic. "My evidence pack. Printed. Stamped. Real. This," he said, slapping it once for emphasis, "contains repeated warnings from a qualified engineer, time-stamped photos, and written confirmation that an evacuation route was deliberately blocked." A murmur rippled through the room, anger replacing panic. The county official stepped forward next, already on the phone speaker blasting through the din. "Yes. We're invoking emergency authority. Freeze association assets. Secure all records on site." Blair looked up sharply. "You can't. You're done," the official said, not raising his voice. "Sit down." She didn't. Instead, she stood there, shaking rainwater, dripping from her hair, onto the tile, eyes darting, as if searching for a version of this night where she still had control. "This is being misrepresented," she said, voice cracking. "We acted in good faith." The fire marshal flipped the folder open and pulled a single page. "Is this your signature?" he asked, holding it up. Blair stared at it. "The altered evacuation map. Reclassified. Unsigned by any authority but hers." "Yes," she whispered. "And this email," the county official added, projecting it onto a hastily connected screen. "No more ugly infrastructure ruining our views. Lock it down. I'll handle the fallout." Her words, her address, her timestamp. The room went still. Outside, another deep crash thundered through the night, as part of the slope collapsed again, closer this time. The building trembled, dust falling from a ceiling tile. People gasped, some crying openly now, not from fear alone, but from recognition. They had been lied to. Blair took a step back, shaking her head. "You don't understand. If we'd flagged it as a hazard, sales would have collapsed. Investors would have pulled." "There it is!" someone shouted. She knew. The deputy moved in, placing a hand on Blair's arm. "Ma'am, you need to remain here." She jerked away. "I was protecting this community. You protected the image," the fire marshal snapped. "You buried the risk." A siren wailed closer, now heavy equipment finally forcing its way through flooded streets. The marshal keyed his radio without breaking eye contact with Blair. "Confirm this." Debris flow followed the blocked egress path. A voice crackled back. Affirmative. Flow lines matched the sealed exit corridor. That was it. The last excuse evaporated. Blair's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of a folding table to stay upright, breath coming in shallow gasps. "I didn't think it would happen like this," she whispered. "I thought we had time." No one answered her. The county official nodded to a deputy. "Detain her. Secure her phone." Blair looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're arresting me. During an emergency," the deputy didn't hesitate. "For endangerment, obstruction, evidence suppression." Handcuffs clicked shut, sharp, unmistakable. The sound cut through the room harder than the sirens. Phones rose again, not to gloat, but to capture the moment power finally collapsed under its own weight. Blair didn't fight. She couldn't. The performance was over. As deputies escorted her toward a side exit, another roar rolled through the night, followed by screams from outside. A responder burst in, soaked and breathless. Second, structure compromised. Eastern row, partial collapse. The marshal spun, already moving. "All units redeploy. This isn't finished." He paused just long enough to look at me. "Your maps held." I nodded, throat tight, watching responders surge back into the rain, while Blair was led away, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. The community center emptied again as people were pushed toward safer ground. Outside, floodlights illuminated a landscape. Transformed, roads gone, yards erased, the hillside carved open like a wound that refused to close. But the truth was finally exposed, undeniable, and public, stamped into the night with mud and sirens and handcuffs. The hill had taken what it wanted. And the woman who thought she could outmaneuver it lost everything in front of everyone she'd sworn she was protecting. The storm raged on, but the lie was over. The emergency shelter was the school gym lit by harsh fluorescents that made everyone look older and smaller at the same time. Wet jackets hung from basketball hoops. Shoes lined the wall in muddy, mismatched pairs. The storm still hammered the roof, but inside it was mostly quiet. No speeches, no arguing. Just that stunned, hollow calm you get when your body finally realizes you survived something it wasn't supposed to. People kept drifting toward me in ones and twos, not to praise me, but to unload the words they'd swallowed for weeks. "I'm sorry," a man muttered, eyes fixed on the floor. I signed that statement. A woman with shaking hands pressed a paper cup of coffee into my palm like it was an apology she couldn't say out loud. Frank stood nearby, arms crossed, guarding space around my family without making a show of it. My wife sat on the bleachers with our kid tucked against her side, watching me with that steady look that said, "Keep going, but don't break." Above the doors, someone had taped up a torn piece of cardboard with a marker scrawl, "Evacuation, check-in." It should have been there weeks ago, official, clear, respected. Instead, it took mud and screaming to make everyone listen. My phone buzzed nonstop until a number I recognized finally cut through. I put it on speaker so the county officials could hear, and because I didn't trust anything not to vanish anymore. My attorney's voice came through, clipped, and calm, the tone people use when they're trying not to sound shocked by their own words. "Grant Emergency Management just executed an asset freeze on the association accounts," she said. "Records are being seized tonight. The state is opening a criminal investigation, felony-level endangerment, obstruction, and evidence suppression. The contractor's materials you forwarded, they're gold." Across the gym, I saw a county rep nod once, confirming without needing to speak. My attorney continued. "They're also setting up a restitution framework immediately, initially low 8 figures, because insurers are already signaling denial due to misconduct. That means the HOA and board are exposed personally." I didn't feel triumph. I felt a grim kind of relief, like a tourniquet, finally tightening around a wound that had been bleeding in secret. Someone behind me whispered, "She's really done." Another voice answered, "She did it to us." No one needed a lecture. The facts landed like weights, heavy and final, and the room shifted in a way I'd never felt in Juniper Ridge. Not fear of the HOA, but freedom from it. Near the far wall, a deputy walked in carrying a flat, rectangular object wrapped in a clear evidence bag. He scanned the room until he found me, then held it out without ceremony. Inside the plastic was the old red sign, "Emergency Exit," the one they'd removed and replaced with that stupid brushed metal Scenic access placard. The deputy's voice stayed neutral, recovered near the gate. "County's preserving it." I stared at it for a beat longer than I meant to, because it wasn't just a sign, it was the whole story condensed into 2 words. Exit, emergency. A choice between living and being trapped. The fire marshal stepped up beside me, tired lines carved deep in his face, and said quietly, "We're restoring the route as soon as the slope stabilizes. And we're installing a siren. Real protocol. No HOA override." I nodded, feeling my wife's hand find mine from behind, warm against my knuckles. Outside, the storm still rumbled, but it didn't feel like a threat anymore, just weather finishing what it started. I looked down at the sign and the evidence bag, then up at the gym full of people who'd finally stopped pretending, and I understood something simple. The neighborhood wasn't rebuilt by optimism or vision. It would be rebuilt by humility and preparation, and by never letting one person weld shut the only way out. A pretty community is easy. A safe one takes spine. Looking back, the win wasn't what mattered most, the way we got through it was. I'm not proud of being right. If I'd chased ego or tried to bulldoze my way through that gate with anger, this story would have ended with sirens for a different reason. What changed everything wasn't volume or grit or me standing there in the rain looking dramatic. It was the boring stuff I didn't want to do at first, documenting, reporting, and letting the process catch up to the truth. The law moved slow, but it moved. And I need to be clear about the line. Standing up doesn't mean swinging back. It doesn't mean threats, vandalism, or doing something you can't take back just because someone else acted reckless. Rage feels powerful for about 5 seconds. Evidence lasts. A calm timeline, a stamped record, a clean email chain, those are the things that held up when the mud came and every excuse washed away. That's what kept the story from becoming another headline about neighbors fighting instead of people being protected. If you ever find yourself in a situation where someone with authority is cutting corners, don't try to out-drama them. Keep your receipts, save the notices, take photos the day you see something change. If you're dealing with permits or access routes, look up what's public and what's actually filed, because paper trails don't care about personalities. And when it stops feeling like a disagreement and starts feeling like risk, that's when you bring in the people whose job is to deal with risk officials, inspectors, or a lawyer who knows the terrain. That night in the gym holding the emergency exit sign in a plastic bag, it hit me. Communities don't stay safe because everyone's nice. They stay safe because the rules apply to everyone, including the HOA. And the moment we stop letting anyone weld the truth shut, the sirens can go back to being a warning, not a consequence.